Well, we need to get started in about a minute or two here. And wow, we got some new folks. I see a few new faces. Thank you. Of course, they're not new to you. I understand, but for me, they're new. Well, I guess we will leave the door open for a little bit. I think we'll have some more people probably coming back. I am so glad that you're here. Talk about a bunch of people gluttons for punishment. I am so glad you came back. You might have heard about the old guy. He was not a very good dad, and his kid had ended up in jail. And he's really depressed. So he writes his son in jail, "Dear son, I am so sad. It's that time of year when you and I used to plant the tomatoes together. But I'm an old man, and you're in jail. I'm so sad. Love, Dad." Well, a day or two later, Dad gets a letter back from his son in jail. "Dear Dad, I will do my best." And with that, the son also said in his letter, he said, "Dear Dad, don't dig up the garden. That's where I buried all the bodies." Well, of course, the FBI gets the letter. They come, they get the old fellow's property, they dig up everything. They cannot find a single thing. About 2 days later, Dad gets another letter from his kid in jail. "Dear Dad, sorry I couldn't be there to help. I hope you enjoyed the garden. It was the best I could do in a hurry." I'm going to do this in a hurry. We're going to move kind of quickly today. I told you in the first session that I run at about 700 or 800 words a minute with gusts up to about 1,000. And that's because we've got a lot to cover. Now, we're in the middle of 14 very vital concepts. Let me kind of get back here so it looks, well, it's not, I thought it was, never mind. Well, let's skip that part. Anyways, we're in the middle of 14 concepts on how to live in the world without becoming a part of the world as leaders in God's church. And I made the case, and I'm repeating a few things because we have some new people here. I made the case in the first meeting that when I come and do a leadership summit at a church, I like to tell the audience, there are 3 groups of you in here. There are those of you in here who are the leaders. You know your leaders, your elders, your business owners, whatever. You lead, you like to lead, you're good at it. Then there is another group of the kind of the shy leaders. These are the people who other folks come to for your advice. They look up to you. They're always asking for input, but you don't think of yourself as a leader. And then there's that third group in every church and in every organization that I've ever worked with that I call the leaders in waiting. These are the people who have yet to step up to the bar and take on the mantle of leadership. And I also mentioned in the first session that I do this kind of teaching on a professional level. I've worked with a lot of businesses, Walmart, McDonald's, American Airlines, companies like that, and little tiny mom and pop shops too, training leadership concepts. But what I love to do is to come to churches, come to Christian events like this, and to date we've done about 900 or 950 of them. About 650 of those were no debt, no sweat seminars, but we've met at a lot of churches, a lot of congregations over these decades to really help people. One of the seminars, the No Debt, No Sweat seminar, is one where we teach Christian money management, how to give better, how to get out of debt, what to teach your kids, how to stop fighting with your spouse, how to really get focused on eternity and live, and end up strong. But the main seminar that I do is the Leadership Summit. And today what I'm doing are some pieces from the Leadership Summit. This is not nearly all of it. Some of these pieces don't really go into that particular teaching when I come to a church, but they're similar. Now, I know this is a confused bag of things, but as I started to say this, because I wanted those of you that are here for the first time to kind of get caught up to speed with what we've already covered here. And as I started talking, I kept running down rabbit holes there, if you didn't notice. And now I'm kind of back to center, and we're going to step into this. In our first visit, we shared 6 of these 14 concepts. Now we're going to step into the number 7. I call these thought sparklers. These are things that I hope you will think about, ponder. You may or may not agree with, and that's perfectly okay. I just told the first group that, to me, there's nothing wrong with it. Anytime you share a new idea with anybody, they're going to, whether they accept it or reject it, they're never going to come back to the same dimension. It's going to stretch us a little bit as we talk about it. So right now, I want to talk to you a little bit about what I call the message versus the method. what is this about and what are we discussing? First off, I'm just going to say this as bluntly as I know how to. Our message, Christians, listen carefully. Our message is 2,000-year-old Orthodox Christianity. It never has changed, and it never will change.
Amen.
Homosexuality was a sin 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Homosexuality is a sin January 2026. Okay, the message never changes. But our methodology had better change. Steve, does that mean that you agree with Rick Warren? You're going to reduce it to pablum in order to get people in? Absolutely not. We never compromise on the message. But at the same time, we have got to understand that our methodology is going to be the make it or break it as to whether the people that we want to share Jesus with ever really and truly hear that message. Today's growing churches, whether they're churches of Christ or other denominations, the days growing churches tend to be Bible-focused churches. And if you've not noticed, let me tell you what the news has been for the last year or two now. These huge mega churches that have pretty much played to everybody, turned it into nothing more than entertainment. These churches have been imploding right and left. If you've not caught that, you need to be aware of that. That's going on everywhere. The churches that remain standing, and now again, there are still some of the churches that are here, of course, but the ones that are doing very well, that are growing now, tend to be churches that are very Bible-focused. And again, not necessarily churches of Christ, but churches of Christ that are staying on message and doing it in a proper way are seeing a lot of strength these days. Today's growing churches, they're Bible-focused. Churches of Christ, though, let me just say this as clearly as I can. I was just discussing this with someone else. Churches of Christ, at the rate we are going today, are on a collision course with extinction. In another 25, 30 years, churches of Christ, as we know them today, if things don't change, are very likely going to be very close to gone. So how do we deal with this and how do we work with it? Well, it boils down in many ways to this message method thing. Our message stays true, but our methodology has to change. Sociologists used to say that it took about 20 to 25 years for there to be broad societal change on how people reacted and thought about almost any given topic. They're telling us now that this is happening every 4, 5, 6 years. So here's what that means. It means that whatever you were doing 5 or 6, 7 years ago to reach people in your community for Christ, if you're still doing that same old, you're probably no longer reaching them. Because those people are on a continuum, and they're moving all the time. And if you're still back here doing those, reaching out the same way you were, then those people aren't even there anymore to hear what you're saying. Back in the 1950s, 1960s, I remember when we were door knocking right and left, and there was everything good about that, and it worked beautifully. But could you imagine today trying to go door to door? Now, down here in Lubbock, it's a little more conservative. It's a little easier, maybe, arguably. But honestly, even here in Lubbock, could you imagine trying to get in and talk to people? Because most people aren't going to open the door. People are scared. Things are not the way they used to be. So we have to change as time passes. I won't belabor that. That's just the way it is. So this message versus method thing, how does this look and how does it work? Well, let me give you a good example of it. Back in 1934, American Airlines came out with this logo. And by the way, in those days, that was the hottest looking logo around. That was a super smart, update, cooking, and pushing logo right there. People were impressed by this thing. And it featured exactly what their message was. American Airlines wanted you to see those two big A's, American Airlines, with that red, white, and blue look, and show that American eagle, that beautiful American eagle flying off. That was their story. We are America's airline. Delta can't do that. United can't do that, and on it goes. But American could. Well, as the years passed, that started to look dated. So in the 1940s, this is what they came out with. And then by the 1960s, that was what they were using. And late in the 1960s, they came along with this one. And then a few years ago, they completely scratched all of those, and they came out with this. What they have done over these decades is they have changed their methodology. But they have never one time, watch this carefully, they have never one time changed their message. It's always about the two big A's and that big American eagle flying into the future. Now, this is what I'm saying we need to do. We don't need to equate becoming relevant, becoming timely in the way we communicate, with becoming weak on the scriptures, okay? And obviously, if you can only have one of those, always be strong on the scriptures. But it's great to be strong on the scriptures, however, it's not very helpful if what you're teaching isn't being heard. And I'm telling you, this is something that when I talk to churches, when I come and visit at churches, this is something that we really have to focus on because we want people to be relevant. Jesus was the most relevant man around. He was constantly telling contemporary stories that the people of his day and age totally understood. They lived with every single day. Why we go back and again, please don't mishear what I'm saying here. Why we go back and use the same illustrations that the Bible used doesn't always make sense. I think we should teach them. I think we should learn them. But maybe we take the principle that the Bible teaches, and instead of using the example, the illustration maybe that Jesus might have used in a parable, come to that same principle with a parable or an illustration of our own that is more timely and more in sync with what people can hear. That's the biggest reason why most of us have probably gotten away from the old 1611 King James Version of the Bible. I mean, some of us grew up being told that was the only proper version to use. And if you still feel that way, I'm not going to debate with you at all. But I think most of us in here probably are using a New American Standard or help me out here, a New International or, one of these others. And again, they all have their strengths and weaknesses. I'm not getting into a debate on Bible translations. If you ever want to do that, I'm happy to talk. But right here now, all I'm trying to say is we don't really talk like they did in England in 1611. And if you try to teach somebody with that material, you've got a big hurdle to get over before you get down to the nut of the issue. So why not get rid of the hurdle, and why not just go in low, slow, and direct? It just makes better sense in my judgment. So how do we do this? Well, if we're going to really reach this world as it is today, we're going to have to become people who learn how to tell the story. And again, you say, whoa, wait up a minute, back up the story, Bus Diggs. I am not one of those touchy-feely people who likes to tell stories. Well, tough. If you're not one of those people, get over it. You need to love other folks enough. I'm just saying this. You need to love other folks enough whose souls may be in jeopardy to do what you have to do to get to them. I can tell you this. Back in the day when I was running one of my corporations, and it was a creative marketing business. We had a radio and television production company. We had an ad agency and some things. And I told the last crowd, anytime I say this in front of a group of Christians, I always have to put an asterisk on and say, listen, we were Christian run and operated. We did things the best we knew how to, God's way. Okay. But nonetheless, in those days, when I ran that business, I learned something real quick. I learned that I had two groups of people. I had right brain and I had left brain thinkers. And I had to be able to talk to both of those people. If I didn't, there was going to be open warfare. The account executives and the accounting people, they were left brain. All they wanted to make sure was that the numbers were hitting right. The writers, the photographers, all the creative people, they were right brainers. You have to bring them together. That is a duty of leadership. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but this is just something that we have to get to the point of saying, listen, this is not about me. It's about reaching other folk that need what I have to share with them. So how do we do this? How do we tell the story? What's this about? Successful people always play to the heart. Now, wait a minute, Steve, that sounds pretty Pentecostal. That sounds like one of those TV evangelists that's always getting the people's emotions stirred up. Not so, not so. There is nothing wrong with touching people's emotions. There is everything wrong with being an emotionalist. There's a big difference, okay? And Christ routinely touched people's emotions. And this is something we need to understand, that if we're not already doing it, we need to get in other people's shoes. We need to be able to tell people stories that touch them where they live. Let me just give you a story, for instance. Let's suppose it's about 2 weeks away from Christmas, okay? And I go into the Waffle House down the street from me in Nashville. You guys have Waffle Houses, right? Yep. I mean, you're in America, you've got to have Waffle Houses. Okay. You don't? You need to move. But we have a Waffle House pretty close to us in Nashville. Suppose I go in there, and I sit down one day, and a little girl comes up to me. She's maybe 20 years old. She looks like she's 40. She's so worn out. Her name tag says her name is Megan, and she's got one of those little picture things on here of two little toddlers. She's not wearing a wedding ring. You kind of know the story. And she comes up to take my order, and she's not happy. She's not enjoying her day, and she's letting me know. But I order my food, I try to talk with her a little bit and communicate. And we do. She begins to talk with me. Well, maybe a week later, just a few days before Christmas, I say to Bonnie, I say, hey babe, why don't we go eat dinner tonight over at the Waffle House? So we go over that night, and again, Megan is at work, and I'm so glad to see her. And Bonnie and I start to talk to Megan, and we really have a good conversation this night. And at the end of the evening, we get up after they brought us the ticket. Bonnie and I get up, and Bonnie reaches in her purse, or I reach in my billfold, and we pull out 3 crisp $100 bills and slip them under the plate. And then very quietly, we walk out into the darkness, and we sit down in the car, and we wait and watch through those glass windows. We watch Megan pick up the plate. Now, Christians, I would tell you that is what Christmas is really all about. Mm-hmm. Now, listen to what just now happened. I just told you a story. Does anybody feel any goosebumps? Did that touch anybody's heart? You see, this is what we have to learn how to do. We have to learn how to love other people enough to pour ourselves out for them. And when that happens, everything changes for the better forever. What we have to understand in this process, especially those of you in here that are 50, 60 years old and older, if you're much over 60, you are what is known as a modernist. We were born in that era of modernity, sometimes called the Enlightenment, when really all we had to do was get enough facts and stack them on top of each other and come to a clear, inalterable conclusion on any topic. And it didn't matter how we felt or how we behaved or how we acted. Truth was truth, fact was fact, right? Yeah. Some of us can identify it here. I got a bro here wearing a coat and tie. I bet $100 you can identify with that, right? Yes, that's the way I grew up. That's exactly the way we grew up. But if you're much under 60, certainly if you're under 50, you've grown up in the age of postmodernism. And in this era, you were taught consistently that everybody was just fine. Your beliefs are your beliefs, my beliefs. We're not going to argue. We're all going to get along and sing kumbaya at the end of the day. It doesn't matter, and we just want to feel good about things. And we don't have to agree on any of these things. I mean, nothing's as important as us just getting along. Well, the reality is both sides are right and both sides are wrong. We modernists, I think, are right when we say, yes, there is such a thing as absolute truth, absolutely. I believe that. But on the other side, I totally understand these postmodernists that say, well, Steve, if you feel like you've got truth, then why don't you show some compassion, some kindness, some love, some heart about it? They've got a real point. And this is the world, this is the dichotomy that we are now living in. And if we understand this, we will begin to understand that maybe what we have to do is talk to people where they're at. And if you're talking to somebody my age, give me just the facts, man. I'm good with that. But if I'm talking to somebody y'all's age, I'm going to realize that you've grown up in a different world. I hope you haven't bought into that world's philosophy. But hearing the emotions, hearing the story makes a big deal. And before anybody criticizes this, one more time, remember, Jesus taught with what? Stories. We call them parables. He told stories right and left. Jesus was probably the greatest storyteller of all time. So I'm not going to throw any rocks at Jesus. I mean, he's God. So if he did it, I'm good with it. The longest 18-inch trip in the world. I used to get up in front of audiences. I used to say, the longest 18-inch trip in the world, that's the trip from your head down here to your heart. And I thought I was saying the right thing. I don't believe that anymore. Not at all. I believe the longest 18-inch trip in the world begins at the heart and migrates northward to the head. This is what I call the motivation information matrix. In other words, rather than starting with the data, I'm going to start with the heart. I'm going to tell a story that touches people so that they are then wide open and ready to listen. If you preach, tell stories. If you love other people, tell stories. They don't have to be elaborate. They can be as simple as simply saying, you know, I remember when I was your age and we were trying to pay the bills and everything was upside down. That is a story right there. You don't have to complicate a crowbar. That is all there is to this. But when we start to do this, then the other person falls in love with you, for one thing. And people tend to listen better to folks they love. But they're just so much more open. It's a changed dynamic that a lot of us have not picked up on. A lot of us have, by the way. I'm hearing better and better preaching in many cases from our pulpits than I ever had before. Okay? What we used to have back in the 50s and the 60s, besides being highly, highly sectarian in many cases, it was also very angry in many cases. And it tended to be very negative. By the way, there is a place for godly anger. There is a place to be negative. But to be known for that, as a fellowship word, that's wrong. That is wrong. At the Antioch Church in Nashville, where I'm on staff there, we're about 400 or 500 people. One of the things that, and Bonnie and I have been going there since '77. We've always understood this and we've always practiced it. But about 10 years ago, we heard something that has just to this day, we still remind each other of this. The word in the community, they were calling us the Good Samaritan Church. And I'm not bragging, please, I am not bragging, but that just broke my heart with joy. That's what I want to be known for.
Yeah. Amen.
You know? And once you're known that way, then you can come down with as harsh of teachings, maybe harsh is the wrong word, but as solid teaching as is in the scripture. And people will receive it because at first they know that you love them. You're not here to beat them up. And it kind of begins to work for the opposite direction from where we've been before. So how do we do all this and how does it work? Well, first off, we have to deal with the frustration factor. Many of you in here who are leaders, if truth be known, are probably right now a little bit bummed out. Maybe some of you are real bummed out. Maybe some of you have just been fired. Maybe a lot more of you have been fired in the past, and you're still kind of smarting from that experience. And you felt some pushback. Some of it's your own fault in some cases, okay? But in other cases, it's not your fault. It just, sometimes it happens. So how do we deal with this? Here's the question. As a leader, what is your greatest source of frustration? Somebody tell me.
Brother so-and-so falling asleep every Sunday morning.
Okay. Sleeping congregants. What else?
Apathy.
Apathy? Yeah. Apathy. Boy, I'm glad you said that.
Opinions without commitment.
Opinions without commitment? Yeah. Everybody has a plan, but they don't want to put it in action, right?
Yes, yeah.
Anybody identify with this? And this really touches on the heels of kind of what some of you are saying. What?
You actually have to be there before you can fall asleep.
There you go. There you go. And brother, for whatever it's worth to you, I used to struggle a lot more with that than I do now. You never know what was going on the night before, and you never know. For some people, this is the moment of peace in their week, and they doze off. I'm not exactly excusing it, but I don't know. You change as you get older. When I was 25, I had all the answers. When I was 45, I realized that I didn't, but by the time I'd be 75, I would. Well, I'm 73 right now, 73 and a half, like 12-year-olds say, and I'm nowhere near close to having all the answers. And what I believed 5 years ago about some things, I figure I'm going to probably, if God lets me live another 5 years, I'm going to be changed on some of them, okay? So it's always a moving target for me. But here's the deal. A lot of leaders will tell you, I just don't feel like anybody's fault. I'm breaking my back. I'm spending 20, 30 hours putting a sermon together that they're sleeping through. I don't feel like my influence is what it should be. Nobody's fault. Well, if you can identify with this, I want to share a couple of thoughts, a couple of facts actually. Fact number one, a leader should be the guy that is always dreaming and planning way, light years ahead of everybody else. Number two, if you don't get this, you're constantly going to be a frustrated leader. Here's what I'm talking about. It follows that a leader should be willing to do anything and to pay any price to continue growing and changing. Your leadership will stop the minute you stop growing. So here's the bottom line. Quitting is for quitters. We keep pushing on. Now, you say, well, okay, Steve, that's all fine. You got this big gaudy PowerPoint stuck up there, but how do I do this? How does that work out? I want to talk to you about that in a few minutes here. This brings us to our ninth concept, and that is that we have to understand what the enemy's tricks are and how they play out. The devil is our enemy, Beelzebub, Lucifer, Satan, whatever you want to call him. He is the evil from days past that will be here until Jesus comes back and reclaims us. So we have to understand him. We have to deal with him. The two great killers of leadership are these: apathy and cynicism. And if you think about it, they're really just the same thing, two sides of the same coin. Apathy is when you just get fed up and say, hey, I don't care anymore. I'm sleeping in. I'll steal somebody's sermon off the internet. I don't care. I'm done. I'm done. And cynicism is when you just begin to become critical, sarcastic, biting, talking down about your congregants. That's cynicism. That's wrong. I told you that this is a little chart that changed my life. I want to explain this to you because this is amazing. It's called the leadership graph. I do not know who created it. I did not. But I had taught all kinds of upper level leadership to big corporations and to hundreds of churches before I ever even saw this thing. Changed everything. If you are a leader, this arrow is you, okay? You took off down at the airport and you are now this far out on your flight, and this is your elevation. You've really made some headway, right? Now, you're thinking, well, where are my followers? And you look sideways, you can't see anybody. You look up, there's nobody. You look down, there's nobody. And you're frustrated. You're angry, you're apathetic, you're cynical. Well, what you have to remember is your leaders or your followers are right there. Now, your followers are never going to be as far up elevation-wise or have as much distance as you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a leader. But still, you look all around, you can't even see them. And you think, I have none. When in fact, they're down here in your blind spot. And these are people who would right now not be there. They would be right here if it wasn't for you being right up there. And when you internalize that one concept, then you have fresh horses for the days ahead, and you will learn to thrive in that atmosphere. You do not constantly have to be getting the feedback and the pats on the back. You're realizing academically, if nothing else, that this thing really is working. And you're going to be frustrated. You're going to look back sometimes and think, well, dadgum, get off your behinds and catch up with me. Well, I know that feeling. Sure do know that feeling. But nonetheless, they're coming along. And this makes leadership a fun activity. It should give you joy, as long as you're not expecting impossible things.
Yeah.
So, that brings me to this point. Don't be stupid. Okay? Got a lot of stupid leaders out there. And they make mistakes that hurt themselves, discourage themselves, make their families mad at them, and ultimately mean that they don't have a lot of influence on the people they need to be able to influence. A lot of us have mistakenly thought that being a kind, charitable person is the same thing as being a loving person. But it isn't. Being kind can be stupid, okay? You see, the nature of ministers and ministry people is we have broad hearts, and we get touched, and we're terribly empathetic. If you're good at it, you should be very empathetic. But on the other side, that empathy can become an excuse for all kinds of failed behaviors. We need to stay strong and focused and understand that kindness is not stupidity. Kindness calls people to account. Kindness tells people they need to live up to a standard. Kindness means that you're not a doormat. Okay? I love what Jesus said. Be as wise as snakes, but be as meek as doves. I love that. You know, we ought to be as loving as doves, but we better be as smart as those snakes in the grass, because this is a tough, convoluted, confused, angry world that we're living in. And we have to do it. I don't know if you've ever heard the parable of the stones, but this kind of points out what I'm saying. As a Christian, you need to be the smartest person in the room. You need to understand the devil's tricks. You need to understand how games get played out there. Else you're going to become a victim of those games. Back 200 years ago, very early days of our country, in a little northeastern town, a little hamlet, there lived a cobbler. This cobbler was loved by everybody. He'd made all of their shoes. He was a good man, but he was not a great businessman, and he owed a lot of money. One day there was a boom, 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 knock at his door right there on the town square. And he gets up from his shop, walks to the door, opens the door, and standing out there on the square in front of everybody, and as loud as he can say it, is the town's moneylender. This guy is a snake. He rips people off. He's standing there, and he yells at the cobbler and says, "I want my money, and I want it now." And with that, the cobbler says, "But sir, I don't have it yet. You remember I explained to you that I have that payment coming in next week. I can pay you next week." But that wasn't good enough. The two thugs that were on either side of the cobbler came into the cobbler's shop and grabbed him by the shoulders, drug him out, and threw him down on that street full of stones and rocks. And with that, the lender began berating him again. And he's demanding his money. Well, the cobbler's daughter is still inside the shop. She can take this no longer. So she comes walking through the shop. She walks out the door and into that center of the square, and she looks at the lender and she says, "Sir, what have we got to do to appease you?" And with that, the lender looked at the daughter and he said, "So dear, you want to get involved here? You can do one of two things. You can either turn around right now and go back in that shop, and I will take the shop, I will take the house, and I will get your money. Or, number two, I will bend down here and I will pick up two stones. I'll pick up a brown stone and a white stone. You reach, and I'll put them in my bag. You reach inside my bag and pull out one stone. If you pull out the white stone, then all is forgiven, all is forgotten, and I go away with nothing. But if you pull out the brown stone, then I will get my money, I will take the shop, I will take the house, and young lady, this afternoon, you will become my bride." Well, she was stunned, but she was also wise, and she was watching what was happening. With that, he bends down and he picks up two stones. But she notices that he's not picking up a brown stone and a white stone. Instead, he's actually picking up two brown stones. And with that, she said, "Sir, I'll take you up on that offer." Quickly, she reaches inside of his bag, pulls out one of the brown stones, but before anybody sees it, she lets it drop. And it instantly mingles down with all the other stones. And she says, "Sir, I dropped the stone. But please, reach inside your bag, pull out the remaining stone, show it to all, and then surely they'll know the color of the stone that I pulled out." Well, he was too embarrassed to admit what he had done. And that day, he walked away with no money, no shop, no house, and no bride. And what I'm telling you, Christians, is we can't let stupidity be an excuse for failure. We need to be the smartest people. That means that you need to stay apprised of the news. That means that you need to understand the comings and goings in this world. That means that you need to get to know the people that you lead intimately, what motivates them, what their struggles are, and so forth. And when we do that, we're not stupid Christians trying to lead anything. We're wise Christians trying to inspire good people to be bad people. This also means that we need to understand that good leaders are considerate leaders. We've got to be considerate. And this is really hard because you get the aggravations, you're worn out so much of the time. But I'm going to give you the 4 right A's of good leadership here. And these are 4 things that will really, if you will, shoot a picture of this or write it down, whatever you want to do, and kind of bring yourself back to this when you're in stress situations. I think it'll help. Number 1, always show the right attitude. And I'm going to make this real simple. It's humility. Be a humble person. You're not coming in to win a battle. You're coming in to reach a person, okay? And so this is not about us anymore. It's about that other person. Number two, always do your dealing with other people in the right atmosphere, away from other people so no one's embarrassed. You know, the most dangerous 15 minutes of any week for an elder or a preacher are frequently those 15 minutes between Sunday school and church, right? When somebody's liable to nail you against a wall and start coming at you with something. Now, in many cases, you're standing there listening to this carrying on, and you know that they're wrong, they don't have all the facts, they're off the mark, and you could very easily just completely in front of everybody, just embarrass them to death. But this is when we have to hold our tongue and say, listen, I understand your concern. Rather than continuing this here, as soon as worship is over, could we just meet in my office? I'd love to talk. Love people enough not to take that little pound of flesh that sometimes you feel like you more than deserve. Instead, protect their dignity. Some people will never really understand what you've done, but there will be those who will love you for it. Number three, always offer the right alternative. They say that it's easier to be critical than it is to be creative. A lot of times when there's a stress point going on, the leader doesn't think beyond what's right in front of them. A lot of times the options are A or B. Good leaders, when they realize that people are not gravitating to either one or got a lot of dissent between them, good leaders are the ones who find that option C that will suffice, will modulate, and will bring the people together. It's always easier to criticize something than it is to be creative enough to fix it. So good leaders do that. And this means a lot of role playing. I don't know about you guys, but I don't usually get up in front of any audience if I haven't practiced first. I mean, I've spoken over 4,000 times. I've done a lot of this. But this morning, before you all came in here, I was actually talking through some of this, working on it. Because I feel like it's something that I owe you. Always be smart enough to think ahead, think about what could happen, put extra quivers or extra, I should say, arrows in your quiver. That way, if one thing doesn't work, you've always got another option to pull out and use. Plan ahead. Think, well, what could go wrong in this conversation? And deal with that with yourself so you can deal with it if it comes up later. Number 4, you need to have the right availability. And as a leader, you have to understand that it's all about presence. Now again, you know, it's the weirdest thing. Ministers are so weird. They are so polarized. You have some ministers that are working 70 and 80-hour weeks. My son is a minister at the Clear Creek Church of Christ. He's a preaching minister there down close to Chattanooga. It's a church of not quite 1,000, but close to it. So he has a lot of work. And Josh is hitting it 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And I'm always fussing at him, saying, Doc, you can't keep that going. Back in those days, when I was his age, was running a business. I was averaging for 3 years straight over 100 hours a week. And in 1992, I was still in my 30s when I found them taking me to the hospital and giving me 5 heart bypasses. And then they found more troubles and they gave me 1 to 2 years to live. Guess what? I just had another arteriogram here, whatever it's been, 25, 30 years later. My heart, it looks like it did the day I was born. God healed me. It's a complete healing of God. The people at Vanderbilt have no clue. They don't understand what happened. But the point is, I put myself in that sorry position that God had to drag me out of because I was overdoing it. Now, if you're one of those guys, don't read this to say you can't get off the clock when you need to. But if you're one of these guys, and sadly, I'm afraid we have more of these than we do those, then you need to get busy. You need to spend all the free time you have in study, not just the scriptures. We have studied enough that we know the truth. Some of us just simply need to learn how to apply it better and how to actualize it and become more utilitarian. You've noticed that in this class, I've not used a whole lot of Bible scriptures. I've used some, but I'm treating you as mature adult Christians who really probably know all you need to know. We can always learn more. That's a given. But maybe what we need more right now is to learn how to expand upon and expound what we already do know. And that's kind of what I'm trying to focus on in all of this. Number 13, you need a system. If you're going to get anything done, you need a system. Well, Jesus didn't do that. Yes, he did. He had 12 apostles. He sat the hungry people down in groups, what was it, groups of 50 or whatever, and put them, you know. Jesus worked with systems like any leader does. What is a system? Well, Nelson Searcy says the system is anything that helps you save, let me read it correctly, that saves you stress, time, energy, or money. I really always have too much stress. I never have enough money. I need more energy, and I need more time. So anything that will help me in these things, this is what I want. And that's what a system will tend to do. What I want to share with you here are a few of the 9 systems. Actually, I'm going to share about 4 or 5 of the 9 systems of a healthy church. And these are in great part from Nelson Searcy. I love what he said about this. I have modified these somewhat, but they're basically his. And I'm not going to share all these because we simply don't have time. I'm going to hit on high points, and then without even time for discussion, sadly, we're going to have to keep going. But maybe these will be thought sparkers that will begin to help you think about what your church could do with some of these. First off is the worship planning system. This is a decision that every church should make about our worship. That is how we are going to plan, implement, and evaluate our services. I'm telling you something, if you're doing the same old every single Sunday, then there's no surprise that people are sleeping through the services, okay? We don't do that at anything else. I mean, you go to a ball game, you never know what's going to happen next. You know, sometimes we need to reorganize how we do things. That worship package every Sunday morning should be something that's vital, that's open, that is a little bit unpredictable. I'm not talking about bringing in snake charmers, okay? I'm talking about just doing things a little different, maybe in a different order or whatever. Very important. Also, the evangelism system. This is how we are going to attract new people to our church. And that is a big deal. How do we encourage folk to be with us? And by the way, I would tell you that it does not necessarily start with them coming to church. It starts with building a relationship with them that grows into that invitation for them to come to church. The third would be the assimilation system. This is how we're going to move first-time guests into fully involved members. In other words, who's in charge of teaching them? How are we going to deal with this? They come that first day. Do we know for sure who it is in the church this Sunday morning that is in charge of not only greeting all the visitors, but making sure that you take those visitors around to meet other folks? And by the way, which member of the church has this Sunday, or members of the church this Sunday have it on them to take our visitors to lunch? I mean, do we know before the month?
And we do it every week.
Beautiful. Tell me about that.
I have 8 other families that when we see somebody, I'll pull them out and get the table, put them in the middle, and then we will talk with them, get information from them, where they're from, why they're coming to visit Shiloh Road. Oftentimes Bible studies, because they're saying we're looking for a church to belong to. Now it's worked with us, but like you said, you've got to have a group of people, and you've got to pick certain people to have extrovert type not someone that sits there like they're constipated.
Yeah.
You want somebody smiling, kind of being real friendly, so they know they got a place that legitimate really welcomes you
Right.
into their home.
That's beautiful. You know, that's something in any church. I don't care if you're 20 members or 2,000 members. That's something every church can do. And something maybe we ought to be doing. How about this one? The ministry system. This is when, and we talk about this more in these concepts a bit more in the leadership summit at a church. But again, just a high point on that. This is how we're going to motivate and mobilize people into significant ministry in the church. If a person in our congregation does not have a specified ministry that they are involved in and have ownership of, that person more than likely will not be at that church forever. They will either fall away from the faith or they'll go somewhere else. But they likely will not be there. This is important. And this is the last one I'm going to mention here, but it's the leadership succession system. What plans have we got? How are we going to go about bringing up new men to lead as our elders? How are we going to develop this? Are we going to be a church where we let the deacons just kind of be, the starting point to become an elder? I hear that criticized a lot. I'm not sure it's to be criticized. I think that can make sense in some cases. But what do we have as a plan to bring men along? Because there's so many churches right now that have maybe 2 or 3 elders, but they're in their 70s or their 80s. And it's always the same thing. Well, I just can't find enough committed guys that will do it. Well, we need to encourage them to get committed. We need to be praying about this, to change this. Here's the final thing I want to talk to you about, and this to me is, in some ways, probably one of the most important things I'm going to share with you today. This is what I call an apology to Debbie Cheery. Back in my 7th grade year, we were about 3 months into the school year when a little girl joined our class. Now, you understand the dynamics of this. Any classroom, the kids they all get congealed in the first couple of weeks. And then if somebody comes in, that person has to be pretty good at their stuff to get accepted. Well, Debbie wasn't good at her stuff. She was awkward, she was not real pretty, and she was ostracized. I wanted her to feel good. I was a Christian, and I wanted to be her friend, and I tried, and I was kind to her. I learned real quickly that Debbie didn't have any church background. Matter of fact, I think, as I've looked back on things over the years, I think she was probably being systematically abused at home. This was long before we talked about those things. I had no clue. But I was her friend. And I can still remember one day, she ran up to me and she said, Steve, it's almost Christmas time. You know what I'm going to get to do? I said, what, Debbie? She says, I'm going to get to go to church. There's a church right down the street. Mom and Daddy said they didn't mind if I walked down to that church, and I get to light a candle on Christmas night. And there I was, all of about 12 years old, and I had all the answers, right? And I'd heard what I'd heard about how it was sinful to have anything religious at Christmas time, despite what Paul says about, allowing other Christians their liberty to hold one day above another. And I never will forget this. God forgive me. I looked at Debbie and I said, Debbie, there's nothing special about Christmas. It's just like Halloween, of all other holidays to dream up. Can you believe it? And then, that old Jim Croce song, he walked away, but his smile never did. Debbie walked away that day, but her smile never did. I have no clue whatever happened to Debbie. But I would honestly crawl across glass to get her forgiveness if I knew how to do it. So I'm telling you, we have got to become people who stand on the truth in ways that some people will criticize us for. We were never called, Jesus calls us to be peacemakers, but we were never called to be peacekeepers. That, according to John Mark Hicks. There are times when we may not be able to keep peace because we have to deal with other issues, bigger issues. Some people believe that they have the spiritual gift in our churches. Some people believe they have the spiritual gift of disagreement. You know how they can suck the energy out of everything. They can turn a sunny day into a storm. They have a way of just demoralizing everybody. And frankly, I am sick and tired of this. 3 signs of a healthy Christian. This individual has an unstoppable drive for unity. This individual has a joy that overflows on all others around them. And this person also has a willingness to rethink things when they get new and improved data to apply. Here's the great danger. The great danger is letting stumbling blocks and grumbling blocks have their way within a church. Why? Because we have leadership that is gutless. Is that one enough? Oh, we just don't want, they're big givers. Oh, we just don't want to cause any trouble. You've already got troubles. And after all, how much is the money worth? But here we have stumbling blocks and grumbling blocks. Paul talks about those back over in 1 Corinthians 8. Back in the day that Paul talked about this, who were these people? Well, these people were usually big people in the church. They were synagogue leaders. They gave a lot of the money. They were the people who studied and they fasted all the time. They were not out here in the world committing horrible sins, as we would call them, like robbing people, raping, murdering, all that kind of stuff. No, these were accepted people in the church, but they missed the bigger point. And that is why Jesus condemned them. Watch this. Who are they today? These, in many cases, are our most active members, but they complain, criticize, they judge other people. They insist on things their way. They may not say it quite that bluntly, but the implication is if they don't get their way, this isn't going to go very well. These are the people who put their own traditions, which they often claim to have a spiritual basis for, over the love, the unity that Jesus pled for. These are the vultures that fly over miles of green farmland, to find some putrid thing to land on and to fuss about and to wreak havoc with. And these are the people that Paul talks about as false teachers. We talk about false teachers, and a lot of times we're going to say, well, that's the church that people clap their hands in. Well, that's not being a false teacher. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. But that's not being a false teacher. Paul talks about what a false teacher looks like. He says, if anyone teaches otherwise and does not agree to the sound instruction of our Lord Jesus Christ and to godly teaching, watch this, they are conceited. These are conceited people who understand nothing. They have an unhealthy interest in controversies and quarrels about the words that result in envy, strife, malicious talk, evil suspicions, and constant friction between people of corrupt mind, who have been robbed of the truth and who think that godliness is a means of financial gain. These are your false teachers right here. These are the people that bring havoc into what should be a love fest within the church. And by the way, if you're sitting here and you're not even identifying with what I'm saying right now, I am so pleased. I am so pleased. There may be a few churches out there like that, but most churches have somebody or some bodies that do this. What is the damage that they do? This is what I call the Spain thing. If you go back and you study chapters 13 through 15 in Romans, you'll see a dichotomy that was, or a situation that was going on there. And a lot of good Bible scholars have gone deeper in this, read between the lines in some cases, based on historical things that were going on. Bottom line, it was this. Paul, many people think, had come to the Roman church at that point in his life in the hopes had come to Rome in the hopes of reaching Rome and really building a strong church base there. And he really was hoping to go on to Spain eventually, go further west to Spain. But he got hindered because of what was going on there in the Roman church. In the Roman church, people were fighting about everything. One thing that had happened, the Caesar had hated Christians. I'm misspeaking. The Caesar hated Jews. And you know that the Roman church was made up primarily of Jewish people at first. And he hated them. He didn't care if they were Christian or non-Christian. He just hated Jews. So he threw them out of Rome on the penalty of death. Many of them went to Alexandria. That left behind a few Christians that were Greeks, that were Roman Christians. Well, in those years, while the Jewish Christians were gone, things changed in the church a little bit. They became a lot more lax. They began doing things a little bit differently. They were eating a love fest. Nothing wrong, but very different from that nice kosher feel that they had before, right? Well, a few years after the Caesar died, his edict died. So the Jews came all back to the church. And they came back and their minds were blown. I mean, how dare you do like this? And some of those Christians were actually eating pork. I mean, all this was going on. And here Paul comes into that situation. And by some people's beliefs, he was probably there for a matter of months, if not years, dealing with this problem because of these stumbling blocks, these grumbling blocks. And by the way, the onus is on the person who's the oldest Christian who knows the most, okay? It's the weaker Christian, the one that does not have as much information knowledge, that we need to consider the most. The person's been here for 20 years, they ought to be, at this point, way grown out of this kind of behavior. But nonetheless, this is going on. Peter was not able to continue his ministry going further west. And it was stopped because of these grumbling blocks and stumbling blocks. There have been all kinds of idiot issues over the centuries that have broken churches up. Asceticism, requiring the use of the tetragrammaton. Does anybody know what that is even?
No.
Somebody tell me.
The YHWH.
Yeah, using the Hebrew spelling of Yahweh and all that in their liturgy and all that. Churches have broken up over that. Churches have literally broken up over the question, did Adam have a belly button? Can you imagine? Come on. How about dietary laws? Also, high church rituals. Some churches want to have a more formal style, others more conservative. Clapping hands in worship. By the way, about 20 years ago, some of our kids have begun to clap their hands during some of the songs. Now, if I'm about to offend you here, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. No, I'm not really sorry. I'm not doing this to offend anybody. I can say that much. But some of our kids started clapping, but they were getting more engaged than they'd ever been in church. And I, for one, was standing there clapping like a seal thing. Man, I just, look at these kids are really engaged. Well, there were some folks, some older folks, who felt like this was bad, and they all go running to the elders and tell them about it. Well, we've had incredible elders all of these decades. Our elders got together, and they got up the next Sunday. One of them got up and said, well, this issue has come up. He explained it. He said, we as the shepherds have all been on this, and we discussed it. And we have decided that from this day forward, if you do not believe in clapping, you don't have to. And that was the end of that. And that ended that. And to this day, some people clap, some don't, and it's never been an issue. But things like that. How about the 5 acts of worship? Did any of us remember those? Somebody tell me what they are real fast. Now that's to get to come to Christ.
Sing, pray, preach,
Give,
pray.
Lord's Supper. Yeah. Now again, I'm all for all that, but people have gotten in all kinds of spazzes when people get up and make an announcement, and they say, well, that's not authorized in Scripture. Well, really, there's no place in Scripture where those 5 acts of worship are authorized altogether. I mean, really? Come on. And you know, I was going to say something else about that. Oh yeah, let me tell you one of the weirdest things that happened. I will not tell you this church. I never talk negatively about any church that's kind enough to have me. But I will tell you that I was at one church where a fellow came up to me and said, Steve, this church is what did he say? He said, this church is made up of false teachers. I said, whoa, really? He said, yeah. I said, well, what makes you think that? He said, because we're not following the 5 acts of worship properly. And I said, well, what was that? I thought he was going to say, well, we forgot to have a prayer one Sunday or something. He said, I'll tell you what happened. We were having the Lord's Supper. You're going to see this Sunday morning when you come to church with us. We're having the Lord's Supper, and then they start to sing. And he said, there's nowhere in Scripture that we're authorized to do 2 acts of worship at once. And it's like, walk away, Steve. Walk away. I mean, at that level of stupidity, I don't know what you do with it. But there are people, you know, that you run into like that. How about the King James Version only? I mentioned that a while ago. There are churches that really thought.
I'll tell you something that's really fun to do
Okay.
on your free time. Talk to a King James only person and use the ASB. I've done it a number of times and never been caught, and it's really funny.
That's interesting. There have been churches that have fought over homeschooling. How about whether a Christian can go to a movie? And by the way, I do not believe Christians ought to go to 99.something% of the movies that are out there today, okay? But the argument, this goes back 50 years ago, whether a Christian can go to a Disney movie. Back then, Disney was a good time. How about interracial marriage? How about having a glass of wine at your meal? Is that something that we are going to get everybody spazzed out about? How about Christian holidays? Some people wanted to celebrate Christmas or Easter on a spiritual level, others not doing so. In churches, crazy. Women, pants, that was in the 70s. Guys, long hair. So I did a little Bible study. What does the Bible really say about these things? Well, I checked the verses. So far, I found on the topic of hand clapping, there are 0 verses. Same thing about holding hands during prayers. We had a minister in our church that got so upset about that, he left our congregation because somebody suggested we hold hands one Sunday during prayer. How about singing during communion? Not anything there. How about small groups on Sunday? Nope, nothing there. What about Sunday school? Nothing there. What about praise teams? Nothing there. What about raising hands in worship? Nothing there. And oh, by the way, what about unity and oneness and love? There are hundreds of passages. So what I'm saying is we need to keep the important things. Here's a frightening indictment from Jesus. Pharisees and the teachers of the law asked Jesus, why don't your disciples live according to the traditions of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands? And he replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, you hypocrites, as it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have to let go of the command. You have let go of the commands of God, and you are holding on to human traditions. And he continued, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. I'm going to pass by that. And just simply say, it is inevitable that stumbling blocks, according to Jesus, should come. But woe to him through whom they do come. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea than that he should cause one of these little ones to stumble. Christians, got to be very, very careful. condemning other people for things until you know for sure that the Scripture also condemns it. Back to the bottom line, we're called to be peacemakers, not peacekeepers. God bless you guys. I love you. I wish we had more time together. I'm right on the button of 12 o'clock. If any of you have not and would like to discuss the No Debt, No Sweat seminar or the leadership summit for your church, I'll hang out here for a few minutes. Be happy to do it. My plane leaves in just about 3 hours, so I won't be here this evening. But I'd love to. And we got some other books. 10 if you buy one, and anything after that is free. So whatever you want to do. God bless you.
One thing you said, Jesus told earthly stories with a heavenly meaning.
That's exactly right. Thank you, guys. Love you. Bye-bye.